Hi there, I'm Dr. Funke Afolabi Brown, and today we are going to be talking about sleep in our preschoolers. So I'm really going to be focusing on that 3 to 5 year old who may or may not be dropping a nap, or who may or may not be pushing back and making bedtime routine seem like an endless chore, who may or may not be seeing, you know, monsters under their beds and needing an extra glass of water and needing to use the bathroom again and again. Does that sound familiar? If it does, then you want to stay on here. So the thing about sleep in our preschoolers is that it changes. Sleep needs in children change very quickly over time. So your child who may be sleeping as an infant or may not be sleeping has needs that are different from your child as a preschooler who may need anywhere from about 10 to 13 hours of sleep. And this really includes naps. The thing that's unique about that age group is they get to a point where they may not necessarily need the nap consistently, and that can affect when you're putting them to bed. And sometimes we may need to get rid of naps depending on what is going on at night, meaning that we want to push, more of their sleep period to the night, especially if it's developmentally appropriate. So we'll talk about all that here. But the main goals of sleep in our preschoolers are similar to everybody else, right? We want them to have good quality sleep. We want them to have appropriate number of hours of sleep. And we want them to wake up rested. We want them to get restful sleep. We want them to wake up not cranky. We want them to go through their day thriving, learning, growing up happy, healthy, and more successful. So that's the overarching goal. Now we have that in mind, then we have to think about how do we get them there? How do we get them from the point where they have their sleep needs, and we're there to support them, to guide them, to make sure that those sleep needs are met. The first thing I would say is creating a sleep schedule. This is something that you will have to work with depending on your time schedule at home, depending on your child's temperament, depending on whether they're in preschool or not, depending on if they're taking a nap or not. So again, remember I said their sleep needs are anywhere from about 10 to 13 hours. So you really have to include the nap time. So if they're in preschool, you think about the fact that they may be napping anywhere from 12:30 to 1:30. And so then that really helps you know, okay, I probably need to get them into bed, say by 8 p.m., depending on what time they're waking in the morning. If your child is not in preschool and is taking a nap at home, then you really get a chance to sort of play around and see what works best to make sure that you are incorporating a nap if they need it, but you're also making sure that they are going to bed at an appropriate time. And that appropriate time varies again. If your child wakes up really early, they may at 6 a.m., for instance, they may be going to bed by 7 p.m. Or if your child is someone that sleeps until about 7 a.m., they may be going to bed by 8 p.m. or even 8:30. So again, you really have to study your child, look for their sleep cues, get a sense of if they're tired. And sleep cues in preschoolers are there. They're different from what you might see in an infant. So you may see them rubbing their eyes. You may be fortunate enough to have a preschooler that says, "I'm tired, mommy, can I go to bed?" Or, "Can you tuck me in?" Wouldn't that be a luxury? Or you may see that they are more irritable. They're just more cranky, or they're more hyperactive. In fact, if they start to become so hyperactive where they're now like, energizer bunnies and running around the house, maybe even naked, that may be a sign that they're overtired, or that you've missed what we call there's almost like a forbidden zone where you want your child to fall asleep before then, if possible, or after that. And the reason why is it really is a time in the night where you're just not able to get them to sleep. So if they're overtired, that may be a sign to you to say, okay, definitely the following night we need to start our bedtime routine early so that they can get to bed early. That's the sleep schedule. The second thing that you want to do to achieve restful sleep in your preschooler is making sure they have a bedtime routine. That bedtime routine should be consistent. And again, it should be consistent. The reason why is our our children are creatures of habits and they like things to be predictable. They don't want us to spring stuff up in front of them and which they are not anticipating, and they want to exert some form of control. So having a routine that's predictable is something that's really helpful, and having a routine that you can be as consistent as possible with is also very helpful. And the elements of the routine is one of the things I would say is your routine should be short. So if you have a routine that's long drawn, it makes your child even more tired. It may cause more bedtime resistance. It makes you more tired. And it just takes up hours and hours. And who has time for that, right? So try to make it as short as possible. I would recommend somewhere between 15 and 25 minutes for a routine. And then if they are taking a bath or so, then you can add maybe about another 10 or 15 minutes as well. So that's something that you really want to own in on and kind of have written down somewhere if you need to. And the parts of the routine I would recommend is having a nutrition piece of it. So probably after dinner, they've already had some wind down period. You may want to give them a snack so they're not saying, I'm hungry when it's time for bed. So have that bedtime snack, and then you take them upstairs. A component of hygiene. So brushing their teeth, having their bath, getting into clean PJs, things like that. That's the second piece. So hygiene. The third would be having some bonding time, right? Go over their day. You can tell stories. You can read books, 1 or 2 books. You have to set a limit because sometimes they want to read 15 books. So you really have to set limits about that as well. And then the time to say goodnight. So those are just the elements. And during that time to say goodnight, you give a kiss, you give some cuddles. Again, really keeping it short and keeping it sweet and keeping it predictable. One of the things around this age that I see pushback on is really around that bedtime routine. Again, you're hearing me say like the 15th time, predictable. One way that you can do that is also by a visual chart, especially if you have a spirited child, right? That child was a little bit strong-willed, but it's all for good. It's all good. Is having a visual chart, something they can look up to and maybe check as well. You can get that from online. Just Google visual chart for bedtime routine or something. And this is something they know it's coming. It's time to use the bathroom, check. It's time to get into PJs, check. It's time to brush our teeth, check. So having that visual chart helps them get buy-in, and you celebrate and make it such a big deal. Another thing that you want to do to make as the bedtime routine as seamless as possible is having options for them. So give them options. Do you want this color PJs? Do you want to pick the PJs you want? Do you want to brush your teeth first, or you use the bathroom first? Things like that. Just make sure you wash your hands, right? So give them some options. That really helps them to know they have some degree of control. And then the other piece to minimize that pushback is, again, setting those limits. This is what we're going to do. And because during the day, you've already lavished them with as much praise as possible, then at nighttime, sometimes we may be a little bit more businesslike, especially for those who really want to push back. And, I'll have some other videos where we'll go into detail about limit setting and things like that. Then finally, in terms of that bedtime routine, is having a transition object that it can be with. So either a lovey, a blanket, or a stuffed animal. Of course, if the child is less than 1, we want to avoid anything being in the crib with them. But if they're about 3 years old, having their favorite stuffed animal with them is definitely something that would help as well. And now finally, in terms of restful sleep in our preschoolers, one of the things I would want to emphasize as well is taking note of developmental changes and taking note of potential sleep issues that they may be having. So if you have a child that's consistently fighting bedtime routine, if you have a child that's consistently complaining about the scaries and they need an extra hug and they need another cup of water, they need to use the bathroom again, I want mommy to put me to bed, I want daddy to put me to bed, and all those things. Start to pay attention to that. When it starts to get into a pattern where it's now pushing back bedtime and it's making bedtime seem like, really arduous for everyone in the family, that may be a sign that we have to make sure we're setting some limits, and it may be a sign that we really need to address some issues with insomnia. And again, these are normal developmental changes, right? They're going to push back. That's expected. They don't know they're testing their limits. But then you will be prepared because you would have watched this video and my subsequent videos to know, like, okay, Dr. Brown mentioned that they may have this, limit setting issues. They may want so many things come up at bedtime, and these are the steps that I need to take. And then the other piece is sleep associations. So again, sleep associations are things that some children may develop, some don't. They're sleep crutches, that's what people call them as well, where they want you to be present for them to fall asleep. Paying attention to those things and really knowing what to do, either by making sure that you're really promoting them falling asleep independently, lavishing praise, limiting settings, all those things will help. Again, this goal of this video was to give you an overview of what we can do to promote healthy sleep in our preschoolers. And I hope it has been helpful. If it has, I would love it if you share this video. If you comment and if you like it, that would be awesome. I am a coach for moms, and I coach moms through prioritizing sleep in themselves and in their children. So if sleep struggles is something that you are experiencing as a mom, either because your preschooler is not sleeping or your mind is racing or something else is going on, then I definitely want us to talk. And the best way to do it would be to connect with me using the link in the show notes, where we could really go through a free call, go over what your needs are and how I could best be of support. So until next time, I hope you rest well.